Okay, so first of all, something interesting. I'm trying to use a specific VPN. Let's see if anything drops. And by the way, I opened the new door. Collected an Oculus. Just because I wanted to get more of the Sandrone's bugs. Why did I return here? Is Sandrone at all? Doesn't look like it. Yay! 2 bugs. Not cool what to do here. Nope. Uh-oh.
First to find gets to stake their claim. Seems fair.
Okay, so the thing that I wanted to do didn't work out. But now it should work. Yeah, ridiculous. Not bad. Now let's see. Double crit. That's what I want, right? Yeah. Well, sure. Why did you make Polonia feminine?
Odds reveal that I think not. I live within you. Take a break. Ha! How tiresome. Take a break. By royal decree, begone. Come on, keep up. So, what's inside? Not that I care. Into the shadows. A duel is a battle of wills, and the sword an extension of the duelist's spirit. If your heart recoils in fear, then your sword may as well be in its scabbard, because you will not wield it effectively against your foe.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Oh, here.
By royal begone!
Oh, that's all here. Mhm. Mhm. But it's still impenetrable. So let's go the other way, I guess. Ooh. Uh-huh.
I think not. Take a break. Come on, keep up. Midnight fin. Such defiance. Take a break. How tiresome. Certainly went out of your way for this, didn't you? It's all yours.
Oh, that's nothing. Uh-huh.
Oz, be gone. Take a break.
Ooh. Uh, no clue yet. There is something here. So something in here. Okay. They're not unique for better or worse. Yeah, okay.
I think not. By royal come on, keep up. Take a break.
For better or worse, oh. The way Sandrone works is she moves pretty fast, even though she doesn't have that much of a... Go change. Oh.
Odds were begun. Our little secret. Come on, keep up. A spot of tea time entertainment. Take a break. Come on, keep up.
Он лишь шеврон ли... That's annoying. Mm.
Oz, reveal! Were my calculations unsound? Begone! Ready. By royal decree. I think not. A stroke of good luck, and a very welcome one.
Um, I'm pretty sure that I can get there with Movuika. Worst case scenario. I didn't anger this dude. It's out of you. Dude, fine. Mm-hmm. Oh.
Most of them I defeated.
No problem.
Begone! Come on, keep up! Let's test my hypothesis. Midnight then! Such defiance. I live within you. Take a break. Huh? All that work for this.
Huh? As usual. The huh is what gets me. 19% crit rate.
Come on, keep up!
Let's go for coffee, maybe. Why I can't see her? Can't I see her? Ah, here she is.
Utensils at the
Very good question.
Observe and know my heart.
A burst of flavor! Odds revealed! Heaven's will, made mine. I think... How tiresome.
Recorded. Each deed will be judged.
How tiresome.
Run.
Ready to hunt some witches.
Time to hunt witches. Oh, it's already 23 plus. Um, double crit rate. Uh, crit rate 3.1. Why the low rolls? Uh, it's more than 31 already, so still quite neat.
This realm is
Hmm. Don't mind if I do. Some challenges. Hmm.
If you ever
that he has for someone that isn't just playing him because they like him. So now let's move on to characters where we have positive things to say. Diona was already a character that was a relatively prevalent replacement option for people that were missing one of the premium options in archetypes which he can fit, which is archetypes that care about her C6's elemental mastery. Historically, that's been meld teams and Nefer teams a little bit more recently, although Diona's long cooldowns make the teams weirder to play. There was that surge of people playing Sac Frag Nefer so that they could do longer rotations that had 3 E's with Nefer instead of 2, but it's not a character you're like all that happy to have unless you're missing other things. At least that was the case before the buffs. But she got some pretty big buffs. So let's very quickly describe how they buffed her. They gave her 2 things. One, they gave her more crown application, but only in stellar teams. This doesn't make more particles or refresh the shield, it's just a little bit of extra power application, and it can happen once every 4 seconds. This is not burst reliant though, which means it's extra fire application that can last for a little bit longer than the burst in those Stellar Conduct teams. That's cool. It also means that she can now use TOM in Stellar Conduct teams, although it won't be entirely full uptime because the trigger condition here is triggering Stellar Conduct, and it can only happen once every 3.5 seconds, but you're not triggering Stellar Conduct every 3.51 seconds. Usually it's either like every 2 seconds or every 3 seconds. If it's 2 seconds, then this will trigger every 4 seconds. If it's every 3 seconds, instead it'll be every 6 seconds, which is a lot slower. And that's not full uptime with Tenacity anymore. And just keep that in mind. Tenacity on her is still not necessarily going to be her best support set, but it does mean that she can use it a little bit more. And shielders being allowed to use TOM does feel a little bit nicer because the shield strength might actually matter. This is actually a reasonable amount of damage if you get the like upper limit of them. Not enough to be anywhere close to a meaningful part of modern teams DPS, but it is enough to put it more in line with characters like Beto and Single Target that like do have damage numbers in their kit. They're just not like necessarily a lot, and it might actually be enough for it to be meaningful to give her some damage stats instead of just focusing on the shield and healing. The other thing that they changed is they buffed her C6, but only for stellar teams. Technically, they buffed it as a whole because now Diona has 25% more HP with this, so she heals more and shields more. So if you're playing Risley, she will prevent you from getting your stellar damage even more. Hoyo probably is going to next make sure that your pillow is always warm after they've done that if you play Risley, because I don't think they like you very much. But yeah, like for the rest, it just is going to make her defensive utility feel a little bit more meaningful. It's not that big of a difference though. The important part of it is that in the Stellar field, you now also buff Superconduct and Stellar Conduct reaction by 40%. Diona C6 in Stellar teams is honestly kind of just in the large cloud and cluster of current kind of premium options that are premium just by virtue of the fact that there are no actual premium options, right? The equivalent to Skirk last slot having a lot of options is basically the case for the 2 remaining slots in Stellar teams right now. So Diona is one of those many options that you can use. It's pretty similar to the other ones. One interesting thing that I actually didn't know about until somewhat recently is that while Diona's burst lasts for 12 seconds, the 200 elemental mastery provided by the C6 is actually a much longer duration than 12 because 1, the duration on the burst only starts counting once the burst lands, not when you throw it, and 2, just like Bennett's attack buff, the buff from this itself actually has a short duration, which means that even when the field leaves, it still lingers for a few seconds. This is not the case for Beto, which we'll talk about next, but that actually means that both of their buffs basically last the same amount of time. 200 EM for Stellar Conduct teams is pretty good. 40% reaction damage bonus for Stellar Conduct teams is pretty good. Diona's downside is that it only applies to the active character, and if you're playing the premium versions of Stellar Conduct teams that use Yai, not applying to the off-field characters is a pretty meaningful downside. This is enough to make it so that her pretty significantly larger buff than Chi-Chi's, who only provides a 50% stellar damage buff as a whole, right? Only 10% more, but without the 200 EM, is actually basically the same. Chi-Chi and Diona are very similar in performance, assuming that your team isn't cooked by the Diona burst cooldown, and that you're not playing units that need to be deployed right before Sandrone, which would obviously make Diona's burst uptime worse. But overall, she's actually pretty solid now. Outside of the Sandrone teams, I mentioned earlier the Melt teams, she can be played with Mawika. You can technically do combos that are a little bit better with Diona than you can without her if you're doing double cryo, and you're not using Diona as solo cryo, is just not enough cryo application. But Diona's burst only applies cryo every 4 seconds because it has standard internal cooldown, but it only applies cryo every other hit, and that means that the actual like upside is very small. The combos you can do aren't actually that much better. You're effectively only getting 1 more melt, and you have to line it up, and it's a 20-second cooldown. It functions, but it's not ideal. It's not something you're like very happy to do. I talked about the Nefer teams, and that's kind of the only teams in which you use Diona nowadays. You can technically, if the content that you do requires some sort of cryo check, use her in other teams. You could use her in a Flynn's team against the upcoming boss, the Forces Stellar Conduct, because Flynn's teams obviously have Electro already, and Diona gives stats that are useful for Flynn's teams. So if you need cryo to deal with a mechanic, can bring Diona, sure, but her cryo application isn't like great, so you might still not want to bring her over some other characters. When it comes to like meta teams, that's pretty much.
Give me EM and AR, please. And B4 stats. A space, please. And that's not the case. Asked nicely. But here I am getting something worse. Please go into crit damage. Thank you. Plus 7%, not bad. Second highest. More crit damage, please. Another 7. Really not bad. More crit damage, please. Circle, of course.
The best idea.
So 16%.
Ever had.
So she currently has 36%. Plus 16, 60. Worst case scenario, I'll get more bottles.
here before. Where is this exactly? Huh? Look! That person over there! Why is she here? I thought she'd be at Silver Moon Hall. Huh. Funny how life works sometimes. Let's go over and say hi. Hey! Columbina! Where are you going? Not too far out. She can't hear us. But what's she doing here? Does she have something to do? Yeah. Paimon doesn't think she'll run into any trouble, but better safe than sorry. Let's go. it out? Why do these rocks look kind of floaty? There's tons of broken machines in here, and none of them are ones we've ever seen before either.
It's still orbit.
It's those floating rocks again! Do you think we can push them out of the way? By royal decree. I think not. How tiresome. Huh? All that work for this. Oh, these look like ruins. Huh? What are those rings? Looks like they've fallen onto the ground or something. Is that so? In that case, could this glowing sign next to it be a manual, maybe? Let's climb and see.
Alert! Alert!
Oh! Darn it! I'm on trigger some kind of intruder alarm!
Alert! Alert! Power transmission has ceased. Please head to the generator room to activate backup power.
Oh, I was just out of power! Ugh! Paimon almost jumped out of her skin! that's supposed to work. Yeah, it's super weird. You think Columbina's already been here? Maybe she discovered that the power wouldn't start and went to look for a solution elsewhere? You know what? Let's give this thing a try anyway. Maybe we can find out what's going on. Huh? Why isn't anything happening? Paimon guessed as much. There's gotta be something else to this. Columbina must have run into this problem and then gone to look somewhere else. Huh? Columbina! Thank goodness we finally found you! Surprised to see us? We were worried you might be in trouble, so we followed you here. Huh? What's wrong? Are you trying to use telepathy like Nicole? Just so you know, we aren't hearing anything. Okay, now you're starting to worry, Paimon. Is someone threatening you? If that's the case, just blink. Huh? What did you do? You want us to activate this? I'm not sure what's going on, but it looks like Columbina wants us to activate this device. We should give it another try. You can use the power Columbina just gave you to activate this thing, right? Oh, the device reacted this time. But these things on the ground, they're for transferring energy, right? We gotta figure out a way to get them flowing again. Awesome! The energy channels are clear! Did you do that, Columbina? Wait, where are you going? You better catch up with her.
Huh? the things that are not there anymore.
Huh? All that work for this. Oh, look! The 3 rings that fell to the ground! Ow! They look pretty fancy now, don't they? Like going out for a bit and coming back to find your little house has suddenly turned into the Don Winery.
Calculating celestial orbits. Please select the trilane coordinates you wish to view.
Trilone coordinates? Wait! So this device is used to work out where the moons are?
Calculating celestial orbits. Please select the trilane coordinates you wish to view. Connecting. Target located.
Whoa! It actually found the frost moon! But why would they need those coordinates anyways?
Oh. Yeah, I figured out that the other two have to be not found. Okay, let's do this stuff. For almost 1 hour straight, I just chatted. And that's fine. Okay. Let's see. Ah. Really? Yeah, no.
Next is Beto. Beto, just like Diona, got some stellar buffs, which is also just one new passive and C6 buff. The new passive is not as good as I initially thought. Right now, Beto is the only character in the game that has a counter that actually needs to be hit by enemies to get the strongest version of the counter. The other characters, Candace and Yujin, can just hold
Hit 'em where it
their
hurts.
counter button and get the strongest version just by waiting. This passive allows Beto to do that too, and it also allows Beto to generate more energy when she triggers a perfect parry, or just gets the counter by holding. And you also reduce
I'll make it
cooldown
painless.
based on the amount of stacks. So if you
happened during the week and what I got up to. Because I'm recording this on Friday, I got back from London very late last night, and basically what I've done is come to the studio, dump my stuff, unpack, catch up on admin, upload footage, and try to scrabble some notes on my laptop. So this is going to be more casual of a video than normal because I just want to get this out as quickly as possible. For some context, London Climate Week has basically become the world's primo climate event because New York Climate Week was also very important. Obviously, the political situation in the US, that's become a little less attended, a little less well funded. So London this year saw over 1,000 individual events taking place across the city over the week. I, of course, did not go to all of them. I had a pretty busy week. I had 12 different events that I went to, and I thought it'd be interesting to talk through my week. And my week started, as it often does, with Monday, and it started early. My first event was at 8 a.m. on Monday morning on Parliament Square, which was a protest by Indigenous peoples asking the UK government for more overseas climate funding. The reason for this protest was successive UK governments have pledged they would increase international climate aid, but what we've seen is real-term cuts. What's happened is there's been very creative accounting where the government has said, oh, you know, we're doing more climate stuff now, by categorizing stuff they were already doing as climate related. In real terms, the budget was reduced by something like 50%. So charity Cool Earth, who I'm ambassador for, organized this event with Indigenous peoples from across the world taking part in it. Fascinating to see because all these groups, obviously very different, spoke different languages. The lingua franca between them was Spanish, which I speak a little bit of, so I could follow the basics of what was happening, but just amazing to see these people who were so passionate about protecting their homes and their forests. And you may have seen the vertical video that we made about it on TikTok or Instagram or here on YouTube. I want to say a massive thank you to Tristan, my vertical video producer, who this week, with good grace and extreme professionalism, woke up to messages from me pretty much every day saying, hey mate, there's this thing happening, here's a bunch of footage, we need to make a short about it. And he just got stuff out of the door. Excellent job, Tristan. And unfortunately, our video about the protest was some of the only
hold it fully, you'll get a 0-second cooldown. You can just use it again. This effect is nice. It allows her to get her first burst in Stygian a lot more easily, which is effectively necessary to make her feel playable in Stygian at all. So I'm kind of glad to see it. But really relying on this effect as like part of your ER requirements, I think is a bad idea, because you'd rather just build more ER and tap E than hold the E and wait. But this just allows you to not have to build even more ER than your sustained ER requirements to get your first burst. So that's kind of nice. The C6 buffs are that when you are in the Stellar field, so only for Stellar Conduct teams, she now gives Cryo Shred. She does not give this Cryo Shred outside of Stellar teams, so you can't use her for like a Cryo carry that's not stellar. But yeah, so she now gives Cryo Shred, which is pretty nice because if you're playing these stellar teams, you're mainly doing either electro or cryo damage, and now she's shredding both. And she also gives the active party member 200 EM. Now, just like Diona, 200 EM to the active character only, so it doesn't affect the whole team. Unlike Diona, the shred does affect the whole team though. Generally, Beto's buffs are a little bit better because the teams have no access to shred, but they're not that much better because 15 is just a pretty small number. Yeah, the first 2 points of shred are the most important, but like if a character gave 1% shred, it wouldn't be very good. And 40 stellar damage is a pretty big number. The main potential issue with Beto is more so the fact that in single target, her electro application is very slow, and she can have energy problems that are a bit more meaningful, as well as her 15-second duration being an actual 15-second duration and not lingering, so it's actually not better uptime. She also, if you need to hold at all, has longer field time than Diona does. She applies more electro, even though it's not a lot, which means that you're reducing your cryo resonance uptime a little bit. You are getting electro resonance as a result, though, so that can alleviate your energy requirements, but electro resonance doesn't alleviate your energy requirements as much as getting cryo particles from a cryo character does, so it's not actually an upside, it just mitigates the downside. Overall, Beto is just one of the many options that are part of the cluster that you can use. Unlike Diona though, because she is basically the only character that is in that cluster that is an electro character that applies element from off field, for people who don't have EI, Beto is going to be a pretty meaningful part of these stellar teams. Both of these characters do nothing for stellar teams without the C6. They will be worse than just using like TTDS Lisa or Fischl or just anything else really if you don't have their C6. So just remember, if you don't actually end up getting their C6s, don't put them on the team just because you're like, oh well, these are characters that people recommend. Like, no, if they don't have C6, they're just not stellar characters. That's kind of a big problem because if you're newer to the game, you might not have these constellations on those characters already, and if you're not going for cons on Sandrone, it's very possible, very likely, you don't end up with C6 on these characters. Overall, these characters are now at C6 pretty alright. They're usable. Like, realistically, it feels weird to call them pretty alright when they are effectively equal to the best options in a character, in the team of a character that is actually pretty solid, but they just have a lot of competition already, and part of that competition is Chi-Chi, who is a standard character that isn't reliant on her constellations to be competitive. But if you don't have any of those, any of the other like limited 5-star characters that are part of the cluster, right? Characters like Escafé, Nicole, having a C6 Diona or a C6 Beto as the last slot you use in those Sandrone teams until they release the next piece of the team is going to be pretty nice. That pretty much does it for this character banner. For new players, this banner isn't as good as it sounds. The fact that these characters basically just aren't stellar characters without C6 means that a new player that pulls on this banner is just not that likely to actually get a stellar 4-star you can use. Like, I'd rather just see Bennett that actually does something in those teams, at least, for new players, but and then obviously Feminine is not. You already have some cons on these 4-stars, but they're not C6, or if you just get lucky and actually do get them to C6, then it's pretty nice, but otherwise, 4-star lineup, not actually all that great. Sandrone herself, I've already talked about her potential value, so that's pretty much that. Citlali in this banner, like Diona in double cryo with Citlali for Mawika, or just other Mal teams in general, is like not great. It's fine, it's usable, but it's not great, which means that the 4-star lineups here don't really matter too much for the teams you'll end up using Citlali in. Citlali herself, pretty solid character, but if you don't want to get her, it is easy to find reasons not to get her. It's easy to find reasons to skip if you're willing to put in the work to learn your alternative combos. Weapon banner. Sandrone's signature weapon is alright. The increase that you get from your best 4-star option is in line with recent weapons, but that's because the 4-star options she has are bad. Her best 4-star option is the craftable one. Sometimes Mailed Flower is slightly better depending on the rest of the team, but it's effectively the same amount of stats as the craftable one, which means that if the upgrade from the weapon is similar to the upgrade you'd get on characters that have better 4-star weapon options, that means that the overall power of the SIG is lower. If you are starting from those other options, then that doesn't really change anything for you, because it's still the same percentage increase. But if you have any 5-star stat stick, or if they end up adding a battle pass weapon that is useful for stellar characters, or even if the new craftable weapon is better, that gap would decrease. The thing is, Sandrone also has some pretty horrendous constellations. So when you look at vertical investment on Sandrone in the short term, it's probably still better to go for her weapon than it is to go for cons, but it's still not good. Most likely, the way to do vertical investment on the Sandrone team is going to be to pull C2 on the stellar support. Citlali Sig is kind of just not good. When Citlali came out, her Sig was pretty much it was mostly good for the teams other than the Mauika team where you use Citlali, right? Like if you played Freeze Nevilette, it was pretty good because you couldn't use attack percent from TTDS. But like, that's not really a thing anymore in Stygian. So like really all the teams right now where you use Citlali, you use TTDS. And this weapon is a very, very marginal upgrade over TTDS. TTDS's 20-second cooldown means that in pretty much every modern team that uses Citlali, it only procs every other rotation, not every rotation. And the 28% damage you get from Starcaller's Watch is higher than half of the TTDS buff. The TTDS buff is 48% attack, half of that is 24%. Damage percent is a little bit better than attack percent, so it's just kind of better, but it's a very small difference. It's also straight up worse for the TTDS rotation. A lot of enemies have relatively short periods where you can actually hit them, so maybe the second rotation would be on a shield anyways. Maybe you end up killing the enemy in 3 or 5 rotations, so the average buff is not actually 50%, it's 3 out of 5 rotations, or 2 out of 3 rotations. There's a lot of things that go into it that make it so that Starcaller's Watch is really not that good. In the best case, it's a minor increase. It is basically never better than any of the other ways you can do vertical investment on Mauika teams with Citlali, so it's not really something I'd recommend. The one caveat to that is Citlali Constellations. The main reason why her weapon is so bad is because a lot of the power budget of the weapon is in giving Elemental Mastery, and the only thing that Elemental Mastery actually does on Citlali is make her shield stronger. But on a character that can't get interrupted like Mauika, that matters a lot less. If you get Citlali C1, you get an actual offensive upside to the signature. This means that if you are doing vertical investment in these melt teams and you are getting Citlali Constellations, then Citlali Sig becomes a little bit more useful. A good way to look at it is Citlali Sig isn't a Sig, it's a C3 that's actually useful. You lose your 50-50 to it and you have Citlali and play Mauika, then like, sure, you should use it over TTDS. It is a little bit better, but it is never worth actually going for, unless you already have C2 Citlali. Now, when it comes to using these weapons as stat sticks, well, Citlali Sig is just an EM stat stick, which not actually that many characters care that much about. Nefer cares about Elemental Mastery. A weapon that gives 365 EM is pretty okay. It's gonna be similar to the free-to-play options, sometimes a little bit better. It's an EM stat stick for Sucrose. It's a weapon that has a damage percent buff for Nicole. There's ways to use it, but it's never going to be particularly meaningful. Yeah, you can use it on Llama as well, I guess, just as an EM stat stick if you don't need to run ER Sens. If you do need to run ER Sens with this weapon, though, Spin to Loot is just better. And then Sandrone's Sig is kind of a weird one. You might think that Sandrone's Sig is a decent weapon to lose a 50-50 to for like Mauika, because 28% is a pretty big number. But Mauika's melt teams, the best ones that run Bennett and Neonson, have a lot of flat attack. And the main thing that flat attack does is it reduces the impact of higher base attack and higher attack percent. All right, the flat attack that's like 2,000 and something if you have Aquila, Bennett, and Eonson, is going to be 2,000 attack on every team, and that 2,000 attack is getting multiplied by your damage percent and by your crit. And, you know, there is a 4-star weapon that gives damage percent and crit. So anyone who has Serpent Spine already has a weapon that is capitalizing on those 2 flat attack buffs quite a bit, to the point where the difference between our 1 Serpent Spine and this weapon on Mawika in those melt teams is like 1 to 2%. This weapon is better. If you have it, you can use it, and it has a crit damage substat, which allows you more flexibility in how much crit rate you can get in your artifacts from Mawika, but it's not anywhere close to the sort of stats that you're looking for on a like 50-50 loss target. Because realistically, if you're pulling for this weapon, it's very, very possible that you are doing so for your Mawika team, because it's for Citlali. And this weapon is barely better than Serpent Spine. It can actually be worse than Serpent Spine if you have Refines on Serpent Spine. Overall, not the best 5-star weapon lineup. What about the 4-star weapons? Sacrificial Bow, it's fine. Sacrificial weapons increased a little bit in value with Stygian. One, because, you know, front-loading your particle generation means more easy access to first rotation burst. And 2, because a lot of enemies in Stygian have specific mechanics that you will often actually build your team around. Like, for example, the Secret Source Automaton Overseer device, the Skirk boss, you could tackle by doing a double cryo Mawika team where you did Sac Bow Diona to get through the cryo check very quickly. So it's a nice weapon to have, and sacrificial weapons are some of the weapons where the refines are the most impactful in the game, because it increases not only the odds of the reset happening, but also the cooldown. And there's a pretty big difference between a cooldown being longer than your rotation length and shorter than your rotation length if you're using a sac weapon for energy requirements, and its refine isn't high enough that it can proc every rotation. You basically have to pretend like you don't have it, because you need to have enough energy even on the rotation where it doesn't proc. And if you're using it for damage, like in Linnea's case, well, you get twice the damage on the rotation where it procs, so you lose 50% of the value if your refine isn't high enough for it to proc every rotation. So I'd say that it's like an alright weapon to have here. We're fine with it. Could be better because it's not Fav, but could be worse because it's not useless. Speaking of Fav, we have Fav Sword. Fav Sword used to be the weapon that I considered to be the best in the game, and then they kind of stopped releasing sword characters that want Fav and only released polearm characters that want Fav, and now it's not even close to be the best 4-star weapon in the game anymore. It's still a good weapon. We're still very happy to see it. If you use the characters that want it a lot, then it's good both to get more copies and to get refines, right? If you're using Arena, Shilonen, if you're using teams where you want to be able to skip Bennett's E and it's worth losing some attack buff from it, or if you're using teams that just generate really, really bad particles and that need a Fav proc on Bennett, Chi-Chi in Stellar Team is going to want to use Fav. There's a bunch of characters. So it's still nice. Definitely the best sword that can be on a weapon banner for the 4-star. Rain Slasher, pretty okay option on Hex Mawika. Nowadays, that's kind of it. And Hex Mawika is not worth your sanity. It does give stats that make sense, right? It gives EM and damage percent on characters applied by Hydro, which means that Vape Pyro carries can want it, but it's not like amazing. It's fine, whatever. Definitely not in the top half of best claymores, but still not like the worst one. Dragon's Bane. Dragon's Bane is weird because it is a pretty useful weapon, but nowadays it's only good on characters that don't care about its refines, literally just because it's an EM stat stick. It has 221 EM on it, which is more than what the craftables give you. So on characters that only care about EM, it's better. Nowadays, that's pretty much just Eat Lua. If you use right on Hyperbloom, then, you know, it's nice to have one for her, but otherwise it's pretty much only for Eat Lua, and Eat Lua can also use Fav depending on the team, depending on how much ER you have on your Zabai. Sometimes it's better to use Fav on him so you can give Zabai more particles and or get your burst at the start of the chamber in Stygian. Finally, Sacrag, which is a pretty good weapon, honestly. Sacrag is a good weapon on Sucrose, and Sucrose is a character that has been meta forever, and that will remain meta forever, it seems, because they just keep making her better. Sucrose also has access to TDDS, but more and more teams don't really like TDDS, whether it's because they don't swap from sucrose to your carry, or your carry isn't that big of a portion of your team's damage, or your rotations are shorter than 20 seconds, or just a mix of more than one of these factors, which means that very often Sack Frag is actually Sugro's best weapon in these teams, and you're pretty happy to use it. Now, there can be situations where the Sack Frag proc doesn't actually matter, and the main thing you're using it for is, well, the same thing that you're using Dragon's Vein for on Itlua, just because it has 221 EM, which means that all of the 5-star weapons that have higher EM,
that's
so
nice.
Sitlali's signature, Mizuki's signature, Nahida's signature would all be slightly better, but it's not that big of a difference, and you're pretty happy with using Sack. There's also going to be situations where Wandering Even Star can be better if you have it, so in those situations, I'd say are pretty common. I'd say that, like, if you have both, you'd rather have Wandering Even Star, so maybe it's better to see on a banner than Sack Frag is, but Sack Frag is never a weapon you're unhappy to see. But yeah, so we have two weapons that are, like, kind of alright to have. You're not, like, unhappy to see them. You have one weapon that's pretty good to have, two weapons that don't matter too much. Say the 4-star lineup here is relatively average, maybe it's slightly above average, maybe not. If a weapon banner doesn't have Fabulence nowadays, it's just inherently worse than average, but here I'm using average as a layman's term for median. In that sense, it's above average. So the 4-star lineup, I'd say, is like, okay, but the 5-star lineup is not great. Sandrone's Sig is potentially pretty good on Sandrone, but again, it's not actually that big of an increase if you have any sort of 5-star stat Sig, and Sitlali's Sig, kind of just not a great weapon as a whole. Losing a 50-50 to Sitlali's Sig if you don't play Sitlali feels maybe fine if you have Nicole and you don't have her Sig, but otherwise it doesn't feel the best. And the other way around is kind of similar. Sandrone's Sig isn't actually that great on other characters because characters that care about the attack that this weapon gives you by having high base attack and attack percent often get attack from Bennett and or Eon Sun, and if you get attack from Bennett and or Eon Sun, Serpent Spine is not that much worse than this weapon is. So overall, pretty below average weapon banner. Don't waste your primos in there. And that pretty much does it for the banner review. Personally, I'm not really interested in pulling for Sandrone. I'm a little bit too hesitant to speculate on what's going to end up happening with the early patches in Cesnaya, and because I don't have Yai, I don't know if I want to send, you know, 2 5-star pulls worth of primos just to get Sandrone. Then there's also the chance that Yai turns out to not be part of the final Sandrone premium team, and then I feel like an idiot for getting her, but there's also the chance that she is, and then I feel like an idiot for skipping her. So if I end up getting Sandrone, I feel like I'd have to get Yai, and I don't want to go minus 30k primos or more next patch. My god, there's a new region right around the corner that this is not the right time to pull 2 characters, including an old one, just to make one team. On the J accounts, I don't want to pull for Sandrone, but looking at the Dire lineup next patch, there's a Mauika shield boss and there's a Lunar shield boss, which are the 2 teams I have. So if I can do both of those with my Mauika team and my Flintstein, I might actually be tempted to pull for Sandrone so I can do the Sandrone shield boss and actually get a Dire clear next patch. In the long term, that's probably not a good decision, but I might do it anyway just because it would be nice to say I got a Dire clear on the account. That being said, I'm not sure my Flintstein can kill the dog, so if it can't, then yeah, I mean, that's not that. Listen, Flint's bricked my account, okay? That's all I'm saying. We'll see how it goes. I don't want to get her, but I am preparing for the possibility. I actually pre-farmed both Sandrone and Yai so that if I do end up deciding to get them, I can actually level them and get the clear done before the patch is over. That's my personal plans. As a reminder, I will make a separate video for this banner, and boy, is there a lot to talk about for this banner. So you can look forward to that one. As usual, I hope you enjoyed. I hope you learned a thing or two, and I will see you guys in the next one. Bye, YouTube.
Здравствуйте. Ну что, Six-7 патч уже вышел, а мы, как всегда, постарались сделать гайд на нового персонажа как можно быстрее. Надеюсь, что у нас получилось. Сегодня будем обсуждать Сандроне. Разберем ее способности, выделим роль и назначение, узнаем, как на ней играть. Определим наиболее сильные команды и лучшие варианты сборок. Ближе к концу обсудим приросты от созвездий и сделаем главный вывод. Стоит ли ее крутить? Приятного просмотра! Сандроне — Крио-двуручник. Ее базовые статы на 90 уровне сейчас на твоем экране. В них, в общем-то, нет чего-то неожиданного. Уже привычно высокая базовая атака вкупе с хорошими показателями базового ХП и защиты. За возвышение получает крит-шанс, что также весьма полезный стат для любого персонажа, чья задача — наносить урон. Как и всегда, базовые характеристики в отрыве от способностей не особо информативные, так что предлагаю перейти к ним. Но перед этим напомню, что если тебе хочется покрутить текущие баннеры и требуются так называемые примагемы, загляни на закрытую распродажу GGSell. Это специальный раздел, в котором цены заметно ниже, а попасть сюда можно только по специальной ссылке. Например, прямо сейчас здесь можно купить Луну всего за 373 рубля, а если при оплате ввести промокод HOYAPROMO, получите дополнительную скидку 5% на все товары категории HOYAVERSE, то есть это работает как на Genshin, так и на HSR и ZZZ. Просто выбираете товар, указываете нужный регион и вводите промокод на странице оплаты. Если нужный тебе товар не представлен на распродаже, можно перейти в основной каталог на сайте. Здесь ты точно найдешь то, что тебе нужно. Игры, донат для мобильных и ПК игр, программы и даже подписки на сервисы. Вообще, GGSell — это не обычный магазин, а целый маркетплейс, где продавцы и покупатели со всего мира могут безопасно взаимодействовать друг с другом. Поэтому перед покупкой можно посмотреть описание товара, рейтинг продавца и отзывы. А если возникнут вопросы, всегда поможет поддержка. Все ссылки будут в описании и закрепленном комментарии. Успей закупиться лунами и кристаллами по выгодным ценам только на закрытой распродаже GGSell. Начать разбор умений Сандроне стоит с новой реакции, которую она привносит в игру. Звездный проводник. По аналогии с лунными коллегами, эта реакция заменяет старую, сверхпроводник, если Сандроне будет в отряде. Звездный проводник дает следующие эффекты. Снижает сопротивление к физе, это по сути эффект старого сверхпроводника, то есть он все равно работает, заменяя реакцию на новую, мы ничего не потеряем. Также создает на поле боя область, игра называет ее предел путеводной звезды. В этой области персонажи могут активировать эффект сияния, поэтому для простоты мы назовем все это просто сияние. В этой области мы будем получать бонус для урона звездного проводника, а также обычного крио и электроурона. При этом важно отметить, что сама реакция урон не наносит, но есть персонажи, чей урон считается уроном звездного проводника. Это как с лунной бутонизацией. Сама реакция не дамажит, но есть источники урона, что таковыми считаются. Надеюсь, это понятно. Как работает бонус? В течение первых 4 секунд игра начинает учитывать, какое количество крио и электростатуса было наложено, когда активировано это поле сияния. Причем важно, речь идет не про инстанции урона, а именно про наложение элементальных статусов. Чем больше статусов, тем выше бонус. Зависимость выглядит вот так. Например, если мы наложим 3 электро и 3 крио статуса, то получим 6 стаков. Эти 6 стаков повысят урон звездного проводника на 70%, а обычный крио или электроурон получат 34% бонуса. В течение следующих 4 секунд мы уже будем параллельно и получать бонус от прошлых. То есть бонус, по сути, будет работать всегда после первых 4 секунд от срабатывания первого звездного проводника. Это что касается механики работы самой реакции. Но тут также важно разделить саму реакцию от способностей, которые ей дамажат. Их формула чем-то похожа на аналогичные источники лунного урона. Забегая вперед, Сандроне может бить звездным проводником напрямую. Что на такой урон будет влиять? Скейл способности и стат, от которого он зависит, ну то есть атака и процент, указанный в таланте. Мастерство стихий тоже влияет на такой тип урона. Прибавку можно посмотреть в соответствующей вкладке характеристик персонажа. Бонус к звездному проводнику. Как мы помним, его дает сама реакция за стаки, а еще такие бонусы есть у самих персонажей. Элементарное сопротивление противника. И крит, так как такой урон может критовать. По сути, это такой же набор, как и у прямого лунного урона. Важно отметить, что на этот дэмэдж не влияют ни уровень персонажа, ни бонусы в элементальный урон. Условно, кубок на крио не увеличивает урон Сандроне звездным проводником. Все как у лунных ребят. Давайте обобщим. Звездный проводник работает, если Сандроне есть в отряде. В будущем таких героев станет больше. Сама реакция делает область, в ней увеличивается крио и электроурон, а также прямой урон звездного проводника. И зависит это от того, как много крио и электростатусов способна накладывать команда. Чем больше, тем выше бонус. Прямой урон звездного проводника не увеличивается от уровня и обычных стихийных прибавок или бонусов в источнике урона, то есть не увеличивается любыми аффиксами, кроме бонуса непосредственно в эту реакцию. Такой урон рассчитывается от скейла и стата, от которого он зависит, мастерства стихий, бонуса конкретно в эту реакцию, а также от резиста противника и критов. Ну и да, режет сопротивление к физе, как и старый сверхпроводник, но каких-то других бонусов в него не дает. Надеюсь, что с этим все понятно, можем переходить к самой Сандроне. Атаки с руки. Текста там довольно много, поэтому давайте я сразу перейду к объяснению человеческим языком. Обычные атаки — это последовательность из 3 ударов. Такие атаки также считаются тяжелыми, как у любого двуручника. Тут ничего необычного нет. То же самое касается и атак в падении. Интересное начинается в заряженных атаках. Призывает Фажио. Расшифровывать его мы, пожалуй, не будем. Это кукла, которую вы можете видеть за спиной Сандроне. Эта кукла атакует крио уроном по площади перед собой. Чем-то похоже на Нивелетта, но не совсем. Урон наносится как огнем, так и лучами. Я думаю, вы видите разницу в периодичности. То, что прокает реже, это лучи. Так вот, если мы в сиянии, а для Сандроны это означает просто прокнуть проводник, то лучи начинают бить звездным проводником. При этом огонь все еще бьет обычным крио уроном. Пока мы бьем, у нас будут заполняться шкалы. Грубо говоря, это шкала перегрева. Когда она заполняется полностью, мы перестаем бить звездным проводником, и даже интервалы обычного криоурона становятся более долгими. В общем, пушка перегрелась, стоит прекратить стрелять. До перегрева мы сможем стрелять 4 секунды. Остывает ствол довольно долго, поэтому просто ждать не вариант. Однако с этим помогает элементальный навык, который мы обсудим далее. Кстати, о нем. Сандроне неплохо перемещается, а также строит мосты на воде. Если для тебя это важно, то можешь учесть как фактор, но, конечно, к боевому гайду это имеет мало отношения. Давайте обратим внимание на скейлы. Нас интересуют только эти 4. Первые 2 отвечают за обычный крио-урон при зажатой атаке. Третий множитель заменяет второй, если работает сияние. Это лучи. А урон перегрузки мощности — это когда пушка перегрелась, и он равен обычному урону, но там снижен интервал атак. Вы можете обратить внимание, что скейл на урон звездного проводника ниже, чем у обычного луча. Однако на практике этот урон будет значительно выше из-за того, что он является звездным проводником и считается по-другому. Как с лунатиками. Какие-нибудь 200% скейла на лунном уроне Флинса всегда бьют больше, чем 400% скейла обычным электроуроном. Вот тут то же самое. Элементальный навык. При нажатии Сандроне садится на... Я даже пытаться не буду. Она просто садится на штуку и может парить на ней в течение 6 секунд. В спринте двигается довольно быстро, но опять же это скорее про открытый мир. Самое важное происходит в бою. Если рядом есть враги, то нажатие навыка наносит им урон. Если мы при этом в состоянии сияния, то урон будет считаться звездным проводником. Также в этом состоянии Сандроне очень быстро чинит свою пушку, по сути почти моментально сбрасывает перегрев. Как мы помним, бить до перегрева можно 4 секунды, и эта способность тоже перезаряжается 4 секунды. В итоге мы можем зажать атаку, сбросить перегрев навыком, снова зажать атаку, снова сбросить и так до бесконечности. Как это используется на практике, обсудим в ротациях. Еще навык генерирует крио-частицы энергии. В итоге Ешка — это просто тычка уроном звездного проводника и способ сбросить перегрев нашей заряженной атаки, ну и небольшая подкачка энергии. В бою эта способность используется именно так. Взрыв стихий. Он обладает довольно коротким описанием и прямолинейным принципом работы. Нажатие наносит крио-урон по площади в виде 3 небольших инстанций крио-урона и одной инстанции посильнее. Если мы в состоянии сияния, последняя тычка будет считаться звездным проводником. Скейл также снижен, но по факту урон выше. Ульта стоит 60 энергии и перезаряжается 15 секунд. В целом, ее урона достаточно, чтобы мы хотели ей пользоваться. Он как минимум стоит того, чтобы потратить на него время анимации. Однако баланс восстановления энергии может сунуть палки в колеса, поэтому этот момент довольно ситуативен. Подробнее обсудим в ротациях. Нам осталось обсудить пассивки. Базовая пассивка отвечает за трансформацию обычного сверхпроводника в звездный, а также увеличивает бонус этой реакции на 0,7% за каждую сотку атаки Сандроне. Максимальный бонус достигает 14% при 2000 атаки и выше. Аналогичные пассивки есть у всех лунных легендарок Надкрая. Тут все то же самое, просто другая реакция. Также именно эта пассивка позволяет Сандроне входить в состояние сияния. Пассивка за первое возвышение. В сиянии урон луча, который наносит урон звездным проводником, увеличивается в 4 раза, если мы достигли половины перегрева, а после этого сбросили его с помощью навыка. Помимо этого, за каждое снижение шкалы перегрева на 10 единиц, а всего их 100, мы получаем стак. Эти стаки складываются до 10 раз и сохраняются минуту. Если мы ультуем в состоянии сияния, то стаки тратятся и увеличивают урон последней тычки ульты. Каждый стак дает 10% прямого множителя. Короче, если мы используем ульту просто так, то будет 1 урон. А если мы сначала перегреем пушку и сбросим этот перегрев через навык, то мы получим 10 стаков, а наша ульта ударит в 2 раза больнее. Думаю, что так будет понятнее. Пассивка за четвертое возвышение заливает Сандроне мастерство стихий от ее атаки. Максимальный бонус достигается на 2000 атаки и выше и составляет 160 МС. Это похоже на Флинса. МС полезен для урона, но эта пассивка закрывает большую часть потребностей по нему, чтобы мы могли полностью фокусироваться на доборе атаки и критов. Ну и не боевая пассивка Сандроне. Она позволяет получать дополнительную награду к дейликам в виде закусок. Для этого Сандроне должна быть в отряде во время сбора наград. Мы закончили разбор способностей, можем выделить роль и назначение. Сандроне — это дамагер. Ее основная задача — быть на поле боя и наносить урон, в основном с помощью звездного проводника. При этом она также будет бить и обычным крио, но это нужно в основном для накладывания статуса и поддержания набора стаков для сияния. Большую часть дэмэджа наносится именно звездным проводником. Также у нее есть и альтернативное применение. Ее можно поставить в отряд только ради реализации бонусов звездного проводника под других героев, таких как Ризли или Сайна, что получили соответствующие усиления. Но это применение только для любителей таких героев, поскольку персональные отряды Сандроне значительно сильнее. Как играть на Сандроне? Пока что все выглядит довольно просто. Сначала идет прокаст команды, после чего она выходит на поле боя. Сдаем одну заряженку, сбрасываем перегрев с помощью навыка. Снова заряженка, снова навык. Снова заряженка и снова навык. Всего 3 холд-атаки по 4 секунды. Технически мы можем менять количество холд-атак, тем самым изменяя время, в течение которого Сандроне находится на поле боя. Но в большинстве отрядов оптимальнее всего будет делать 3 серии холд-атак и навыка, а также использовать ульту. В таком случае Сандроне будет на поле в районе 14 секунд, а вся ротация команды займет около 18-20. За это время у нас откатятся кнопки на команде, а большинство бафов не успеет закончиться. Но о возможности влиять на длительность ротации таким образом все равно стоит помнить. Это может быть актуально при появлении других героев. Возможно, она даже сможет неплохо показывать себя в револьверных отрядах, выходя на поле всего на 4-8 секунд, но пока что эффективного метода реализовать это нет. Что касается ульты, мы хотим ее использовать, и делать это стоит хотя бы после одной заряженной атаки, или вовсе в самом конце пребывания Сандроне на поле боя. Это нужно для реализации пассивки, чтобы ульта била в 2 раза больше. Я бы рекомендовал либо ультовать на ней каждый раз в самом конце, либо делать это по возможности после любой ешки, подобно Дзыбай. Сдали холду, ешку, и если у нас доступна ульта, жмем. Делаем так каждый раз, когда оказываемся в подобной ситуации. Ну, либо используем строго в конце ротации, разница по урону в итоге будет незначительной. Ну и как всегда, учитывая, что персонаж только вышел, скорее всего, со временем игроки придумают более совершенные ротации, повышающие урон. Так что если тебя это волнует, рекомендую самостоятельно следить за ситуацией в дальнейшем. Далее будем обсуждать отряды и сборку, но перед этим я попрошу тебя подписаться на этот канал, если тут впервые или уже давно смотришь без подписки. Это не займет много времени, но сильно мне поможет. Еще есть телега с розыгрышами и стримы на Твиче с бесплатной луной за баллы канала. Ну а для самых крутых — Бусти, где почти все ролики выходят на день раньше. Спасибо за поддержку и приятного просмотра далее. Отряды. Для начала важное объявление для тех, кто в танке. Вместе с выходом Сандроне 7 старых персонажей также получили бонусы, большинство из которых связаны со звездным проводником. Подробное видео есть на канале, эти герои сейчас на твоем экране. Так что не удивляйся, что кто-то из них будет часто мелькать в командах Сандроне. Для начала теория. Что нам вообще нужно? Очевидно, нам нужен электроперсонаж, чтобы они вместе с Сандроне могли вызывать звездный проводник. Оставшиеся два слота также в идеале забиваются электро и крио-героями, ведь, как мы помним, чем больше этих статусов, тем больше бонус урона. Однако это не максимально строгое правило, один слот можно выделить на универсального саппорта. Но давайте по порядку. Далее в этом гайде будут появляться числа урона и процентные сравнения в условии стандартных вложений. Все это посчитано разными игроками до релиза, поэтому за точность я ручаться не могу. Скажу лишь, что все выглядит довольно реалистично и, вероятно, близко сойдется с действительностью, как минимум на момент текущего патча. Далее урон отрядов Сандроне, скорее всего, будет только расти, ведь будет выходить все больше и больше новых решений для ее команд, и речь не только про героев. Сейчас же мы рассмотрим то, что доступно уже сейчас. Премиум команда. Большинство теорикрафтеров рассматривают ее как базу, от которой можно оттолкнуться. Яймика, Цици, Эскофье. При этом обычно используют C1 версию Яймика, ведь ее можно взять в селекторе, а консты Цици у всех скачут от расчетов к расчетам. Оно и понятно, у кого-то она валяется C6, а кому-то еще ни одной не выпало. Но в таком варианте команде с C1, C2 Цици насчитывают в районе 140 тысяч урона в секунду, с небольшой разницей в зависимости от источника. C6 Цици, кстати, поднимает урон отряда всего на 6-8% в сравнении с собственным C2, а C0 Цици теряет всего пару процентов. Что касается Эскофье, то она здесь является лучшим решением скорее по случайному стечению обстоятельств. Она просто наносит неплохой урон из кармана, дает полезный криостатус, да и ее срез резиста частично работает. Что Чича, что Эскофье заменяются менее болезненно, чем Яймика. Что вместо них можно использовать? Тут проще озвучить набор героев. Диона и Бейдол, имеющие C6, это хороший вариант. Более того, C6 Диона даже лучше, чем Цици, если та не имеет C2 и выше, но уже немного уступает C2 плюс Чиче. Также внезапно хороша Николь, особенно в конкретной пачке с Яймика и Эскофье, ведь в таком отряде сразу 3 героя бьют от атаки, а Николь бафает всех. Также есть ряд универсальных персонажей, таких как Сахароза, Шелонен или даже Иансан или Беннет. Фишель в связке с Николь тоже выглядит нормально. Их мы можем использовать, но при этом крайне желательно ставить такого героя вместо второго Электро, а не вместо второго Крио. В итоге мы можем получить такой вот набор разнообразных комбинаций последних двух слотов этого отряда. Тут представлено не все, но думаю, что этого достаточно для понимания общей логики. Важно обратить внимание на то, что нам в любом случае крайне желательно поставить второго Крио. Это будет либо Эскофье, либо Цици, либо Диона, если больше никого нет. Ну и также все эти комбинации подразумевают наличие Яймика на аккаунте. Если же ее нет, то урон отрядов Сандроне падает довольно сильно. Лучшая замена ей — это C6 Бейдол. И так мы потеряем в районе трети урона команды, а иногда даже больше. Грубо говоря, наш отряд, что мог бить в районе 140 тысяч, начнет бить около 100 в лучшем случае. Но на самом деле это все еще неплохой урон на стандартах, и большинству игроку не нужен премиум отряд, я считаю важным обратить на это внимание. Если ты не ходишь в шестые натиски, то тебе и такого хватит без проблем, особенно со сборками лучше, чем стандартные. Но в то же время и размер потерь довольно большой, о чем тоже сказать надо. Ее, кстати, можно засунуть в лунную коляску, но в таком случае получим урон плюс-минус любой нормальной лунной коляски, а значит не очень понятно, зачем тратить сюда персонажа, что может добиваться большего. По пачкостроению все сводится вот к чему. Яймика очень важна, при этом желательно иметь на ней C1, взятую из селектора. Ее влияние вполне себе можно соотнести с Эскофье для Скирк, например. Учитывая ее важность, будет не лишним сразу оговорить все важные моменты, связанные с ней при игре с Сандроне. В таком отряде мы не ультуем на Яймика, только ставим тотемы. Так что можно полностью забить на восстанову и упороться в криты и атаку. В качестве сета лучше всего использовать на ней застывшее в тени разочарование, сет для дамагеров Снежной, он будет лучшим с отрывом. Ну и пожалуй все, это было самое важное. Оставшиеся два слота уже не так критичны, там можно придумать разные комбинации из множества героев и терять не очень много. Оверхайпить консты Цици тоже не стоит, разница между C0 и C6 не очень большая, не говоря уже о промежуточных значениях. Она, например, в 3 раза меньше, чем разница от наличия или отсутствия Яймика. Что касается Яймика, стоит ли ее прям выбивать под Сандроне? Этот момент такой уникальный. В таком формате это первый раз в игре происходит. С одной стороны, если ты хочешь полноценно играть на Сандроне, Яя нужна, и дает она очень много. С другой стороны, вообще непонятно, надолго ли. По той информации, что есть сейчас, вроде как надолго. Но уж очень это не похоже на нашего любимого разраба. Поэтому я не стану давать четкого ответа на эту тему. Покажет лишь время. Узнать заранее нельзя, можно только угадать. Но что понятно точно, так это то, что она и без яймика станет сильнее со временем. Поэтому не спешите расстраиваться, если у вас нет яя или нет желания забирать ее на свой аккаунт. Ведь впереди 7.0, новые герои, эпик, который всегда есть в первом патче. Да и этих 100 тысяч Сандроны вполне хватает для закрытия любого базового контента, разве что на какой-нибудь шестой натиск не хватит. Особенно если учесть, что контент в последнее время всегда выходит более лояльным под новых героев и реакции. Тот же лунный заряд, когда одной инефы или одного флинса
Please select the tri-moon coordinates you wish to view.
Ryolune coordinates? Wait! So this device is used to work out where the moons are?
Calculating celestial orbits. Please select the tri-moon coordinates you wish to view. Connection lost. Failed to locate target. Calculating celestial orbits. Please select the tri-moon coordinates you wish to view. Connection lost. Failed to locate target. Calculating celestial orbits. Please select the tri-moon coordinates you wish to view. Connecting. Target located.
Whoa! It actually found the frost moon! But why would they need those coordinates anyways?
Frost moon coordinates located. Base engineering blueprints and main control hall route map have been transmitted.
Oh! These look like schematics! Whatever these are showing, it looks super awesome!
Do you wish to obtain the route map? Please proceed to the main control hall for moon landing preparations.
Moon landing preparations? Columbina, is this place used for getting to the moon?
But Columbina has taken me to the Frost Moon before. Why would she need this device? And the power she just gave me is completely new. I've never seen her use it before.
Oh, the door opened! This leads to the main control hall, right? Columbina? Is that where you want us to go?
Columbina? Can you hold out your hand? Hmm? Place it in mine, just like we do in Silver Moon Hall.
What's all this about? Ah! What's going on? Columbina turned into a black Kalanki!
That's not Columbina!
What? An imposter?
Let's go after her!
What's going on? Why did that black Kalanki look just like Columbina? We gotta hurry up and catch it!
In fact, I've taught myself to play many different instruments. You don't believe me? Find me a piano, and I'll show you a thing or two. Not that I care.
What's that? Looks like something we saw in the blueprint just now. made mine.
How tiresome.
By royal nowhere to run! I think not.
What a joke.
Odds revealed by Not enough! My turn! Such defiance. Phew. It was no problem for you in the end. That should take care of things, right?
Alert. Main control hall defender core destruction confirmed. Initiating self-destruct mode. All personnel, please evacuate immediately. Initiating countdown.
Seriously? This place has gone crazy! It's trying to take us down with it! What should we do? What if some really important intel gets destroyed?
Please verify orbital coordinates.
Huh? What orbital coordinates? Ah! Our mystery Kuhenki's back! What are you doing? Will giving it the coordinates stop the base from self-destructing? What are the coordinates? Don't panic! Don't panic! Let Paimon think!
Whatever. That's going to be it for the stream. Good luck, fun, thanks for